We're all making deals every single day, whether it's just buying a coffee or signing a huge contract. And hey, we're not lawyers, but the good news is you don't need to be one to get a handle on the basic rights that protect you here in Australia. We're going to break down that invisible legal shield that's supposed to make sure you actually get what you paid for. All right, let's kick things off with something I'm sure we've all been through, and it is so frustrating. You just shelled out for something new, and a few days later, it's broken. Your first thought is probably, where's that warranty? But the truth is, you're protected by some really powerful automatic rights that go way, way beyond that little piece of paper. Okay, let's get into it. The absolute foundation of your rights as a buyer is something called the Australian Consumer Law. The best way to think about it is like an invisible shield you carry with you into every single shop and every online checkout. It gives you a whole set of automatic promises from the seller, and these are known as consumer guarantees. The key word here, the one you really need to remember, is automatic. These guarantees are not some optional extra you have to pay for. And here's the kicker. A store can't just write up a policy to wriggle out of them. They apply whether you spent $10 or 10 grand. They're basically built-in promises that the thing you're buying is gonna do its job. So what are these promises exactly? Well, for actual products, the law says they have to be of acceptable quality. That just means they're safe, they're going to last a reasonable amount of time, and they're free from defects. They also have to be fit for purpose. So if you walk into a store and tell the salesperson, hey, I need a phone that's waterproof for diving, and they sell you one, well, it better be able to handle the deep end. Now to really see how this fit-for-purpose thing works in the real world, let's look at this fascinating case from Queensland. A person wanted to buy a horse specifically for competing in shows, what's known as a show hack. They found one that looked right, and they made their intentions crystal clear to the seller. This case is just a perfect example of how powerful that fit-for-purpose guarantee is. So right after they bought it, the horse went lame. The tribunal looked at the facts and said because the buyer told the seller exactly what they needed the horse for, a promise was made, and that promise was broken. They ordered a full refund. It's proof positive that a seller can't just hide behind a no-refund sign. Now, here's where it gets really important. Not all problems are treated the same way. The law draws this really crucial line between a minor failure and a major failure. A minor failure is something that can be fixed pretty easily, like a loose button on a shirt. But a major failure? That's a total deal breaker. It's a problem so big that if you'd known about it beforehand, you never would have bought the item. And why does this matter so much? Well, because it completely changes who's in the driver's seat. For minor little hiccup, the supplier, the store, gets to choose the solution. They can offer to repair it, replace it, or give you a refund. Your job is to go back to them first. But, and this is a big but, if the problem is major, a true deal breaker, bam, the power flips right back to you. You get to call the shots and decide if you want a full refund or a replacement. Okay, so that's stuff you buy in a store, but what about the bigger deals? This pulls us into the world of contracts, and trust me, things can get a little murky here. It's not always about a fancy document with a wax seal. Sometimes a simple conversation can actually lock you into a legally binding agreement. This is such a classic situation. You've talked it all through, you've agreed on the main points, maybe you even shook hands on it, with everyone understanding that the formal contract will be drafted later. So, have you just crossed the line? Are you locked in? Well, the answer, and you hear this a lot in law, is it depends. It all boils down to a famous legal case called Masters v. Cameron, and the whole thing hinges on one simple question. What did you both actually intend? If you both meant to be locked in right then and there and the paperwork was just a formality to tidy things up, then yep, you have a contract. But if the understanding was that nothing was final until that document was signed, then you don't. This is why the exact words you use, like subject to contract, can literally make or break a deal. But what happens when an agreement isn't just a misunderstanding, but is born from something way, way darker? See, a contract that's made under duress, under illegitimate pressure, is not valid. But this case, Affioni v. Sadek, shows this incredible twist. As you can see from the timeline, an agreement was reached just 5 days after a truly terrifying threat. But what's so wild about this is the court didn't just look at the threat, they looked at what happened afterwards. Months later, when he was safe, Mr. Affioni's actions, chasing up the payment, signing the papers without any protest, were seen as him affirming the deal. He essentially, by his own actions, validated that toxic agreement, making it legally binding. It's a crazy outcome. All right, let's shift gears now to probably the highest stakes situation you can imagine. When we put our trust and sometimes our lives in the hands of professionals like doctors, what standard are they really held to? And what do they owe us that goes beyond just their technical skill? So, in medical negligence cases, there's this benchmark called the standard of care. A doctor isn't automatically seen as negligent just because something went wrong. The real question is, did they act in a way that other competent doctors in their field would have? It's often called the Section 50 defense. If a doctor can show their actions were in line with widely accepted professional practice, they might not be held liable. And this is where the law gets really human, because competence isn't just about what's written in a textbook. Is there a duty for a professional to be honest and upfront about their own personal level of experience with a particularly tricky and complex procedure? Let's look at the case of Jembrovic versus Day. Here, a patient was advised by a neurosurgeon to have a really difficult skull-base surgery. Now, the advice itself was a bit questionable because a simple wait-and-see approach was also a totally reasonable option. But there was this other crucial piece of the puzzle that the patient was never given. And this is what's so powerful. The court found that the surgeon's duty wasn't just to explain the general risks of the surgery. He had a duty to tell the patient about his own inexperience. He'd never actually performed that specific operation before. That information was absolutely vital for the patient to give truly informed consent. It's just a huge reminder that professional trust has to be built on total transparency. So think about it, from a toaster that won't toast, to a business deal sealed with a handshake, all the way to the incredible life or death trust you place in a surgeon. These aren't just abstract legal ideas. They are the everyday rules that shape all our interactions, balancing our rights with our responsibilities. And that really leaves us with one final thought. The law isn't set in stone. It has to keep evolving to keep up with technology, with business, and with our changing ideas of what's fair and what's right. From online scams to digital assets, the next big challenge is always just around the corner. Thanks so much for watching.